great to have you here today. I've
I
been a
just
bit,
so honored. I am so honored that I've been following you on Facebook for a while and we've done some minor communications, but when you asked, I was like, "Oh my gosh."
awesome. Awesome. So I know you've been heavily trained. You've done a lot of incredible work when it comes to healing and especially Ayurvedic, which is I'm a huge fan of Ayurvedic medicine and things like that. So just tell me a little bit about some of the roles that you've seen this work improve people's life. And what role, of course, this is the Subconscious Healer podcast. So anything that you have to talk about with the person's subconscious, their mindset, um, how, how how that's been a big part of it. Please dabble in that as well. But tell me some of the roles that you've seen in that playing uh, in your work when it comes to clients healing and whatnot.
Yeah, so Ayurveda specifically, as you know, is broken down into multiple forms of work. We have the herbalism, which is not my expertise. I'm not going to lie. Have done a lot of work with food and nutrition, helping people, work through guilt patterns when it comes
Mm.
to food, help them understand using some basic nutrition, you're not supposed to mix butter and honey in equal amounts in Ayurveda.
I didn't know that.
I know that was such a weird, strange thing. And when I asked the professor in India when I was there, he's like, "That's just the way it is." I said, "Okay." But even just this morning, I was working with a client and she's been taking a few supplements. She added one recently. It's been causing her some nausea. We did some muscle testing, found out it was one thing in particular. So we're just removing it from her schedule. But she's like,
One food item in particular that was contributing to
no,
nausea.
no, 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 no. It's one of those supplements that the people in the know are using. But
Mm,
then I
okay.
saw this other thing about it. I want to talk to you about this actually, because there's like these physical levels of activity, and then there's all this I don't like to call it conspiracy theory. I mean, people can make up whatever they want to make up and people can believe whatever they want to believe, right? However, when it comes to the human digestive system, the whole point of this particular story was that she was eating large amounts of fruit with dairy combined,
Okay.
which is a bit of an Ayurvedic nightmare as well, because fruit digests very rapidly
Right.
and really should only be consumed by itself in large amounts. And then maybe, 30, 45 minutes later, eat the rest of the food. That way you got the pineapple in there with the bromelain for our digestive
Right. Right.
system. And I still maintain that there's some level of physical body and certain rules that need to be maintained for health and wellness, like never eat melon with grains is another one.
Okay.
And kind of in the same idea that grains take a very long time to process with digestion.
Right. Right.
Do not. The whole idea is that you just don't want to have fermentation in your stomach. And the amount of energy that it takes to digest food takes away from all the potential energy for output, exercise,
Anything else, right?
manual labor, brain power, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about that. But then it was also around mindset. So I pay attention to what you talk about a lot. And one
I'm
of the
just writing. I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm just writing down supplements because I want to make sure that we touch on that. So
Oh, I know. And I saw your latest post about, certain things that you're taking and, really how it is. And I feel you on the amount of energy that is being output on a daily basis and what is putting in and how things are digested definitely are going to be regulated by fight or flight response and acceptance of
for certain.
nutrition. And I have my own story about that too that I'd love to share.
Okay. Excellent.
Okay, so she had been having wrist problems and
Okay.
she had gone to the doctor, and the doctor's like, "You're going to need surgery." And she's like,
Hmm.
"Don't want surgery." I met her at just the right time. And I'm like, "Listen, my programs are not that expensive, okay? Like for what I do, what I believe that I do, I should be charging like 3 times as much. And I feel like I'm a fledgling. I've only been doing this for 10 years. So, I mean, there's a part of it. And plus, she's a veteran, and I like giving veterans discounts. I mean, goodness gracious, what they've been through to serve the country and all that kind of stuff. So I have a soft spot for veterans. So she's been having these wrist problems. She was a court reporter. She used to work, everything was
Mm,
fine. And then it's just this nerve pain, right? And so we dug down deep, and it turned out a lot of it had to do with anger that formed around her training process for the court reporting years and years ago.
mm.
We dove deep. So I also work as a minister. So I should say, not only am I a licensed massage therapist, but I'm a lay minister in the church of, it's called the Native Fire Church. It was
Okay.
known before as the SomaVeda. And so they did some,
That's what SomaVeda is. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Excellent. Excellent. Okay.
yeah. So Dr. Anthony James is my teacher, and I still maintain affiliation with the church so that I can work in all the ways that I love to, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it
The
is just
freedom, no, the
difficult.
freedom of that. I'm an ordained minister as well, and I completely agree with what you're uh I completely am in line with that.
Yeah, fantastic. So that's how I'm able to do some of the dialectical work and emotional freedom technique. And oh my gosh, I had this woman digging deep, 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 deep in like mom stuff. It
Mm,
ended up coming up being mom stuff, right? From when she was a small, small child. And you know what? Friday, she's like, I saw her today because we do program like usually every 3 to 4 days, we see one another just to keep the energy moving.
right.
I'm like, oh, how are your wrists doing? She's like, nothing, just a little bit of like, or maybe arthritic crunchiness,
Mm,
she's in
hmm.
her late 60s. We all get a little bit of something, but she's working on it and no more wrist pain. And
Awesome.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we're working through. I'm like, but she is choosing to have the access. She's allowing herself to access some of the old deep stuff and not just pushing it to the side like it's meaningless, it's compartmentalized, it's done and finished.
Eh, Boy, if I had $1 for every time I heard that, right?
Yeah, I know. So she's an excellent client. And
She's choosing to open that door and
yeah.
okay, excellent.
I
Excellent.
mean, she even admitted to me, she's like, I've been in therapy for this and years in the past and this, and I thought I was through this. And I'm like, well, your body's kind of telling us different right now.
Right. Very much so.
Yeah, but right now I have a different veteran client, and he is like I don't know if it's because I'm a woman and younger than him. Like I don't know what the disconnect is. So I'm actually referring him to another local practitioner that takes a very similar stance regarding emotions and
Mm, mm.
um different systems to help release emotions. And so we'll see if they work out a little bit better. It's okay. I can still
So just
I can
just
still do Thai massage on him. You know what I mean?
okay,
He's just
yeah, of
very,
course.
very
Right.
off when it comes to the emotional work.
But just so I'm just I you've kind of sparked my curiosity. What's your view on emotions?
All right. So I love that you're asking this question. I know sometimes it's difficult for me to access them because I was trained as a child not to have them.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I spent a lot of time alone, locked in a room, playing,
Mm,
drawing. I had everything that I could ever want, really. I mean, not that my parents were extraordinarily wealthy or anything, but I never felt like I was missing anything except I wanted a drum kit when I was a kid, and they were like, heck no, Maureen, we're not going to let that happen. So it had taken me years to start accessing my emotions. And there are moments where I'm like, I still don't even know what I feel right now, right? It just kind of, and then have learned how to do some regulation. I have some tools that I use to help regulate both myself and I can, give to clients and everything. But emotions are weird because what Diederik Wolsak told me So you know of him? Have you
Hmm.
looked at
I
any of
do.
his work? Yeah, okay.
Yep, I
So,
do.
so Diedrich is like every negative emotion is a part that has not yet been healed.
Right. So negative emotion. Okay. And what would that, how would you define that? A part that hasn't been healed. Is there any other defining parameters you'd wrap around
Well,
that?
and through my work with the choose again process, I've noticed that a lot of anger, it's like the initiating, like there's something wrong. And then I was born in March. My birthday's March 28th. And so there's this Secret Language of Birthdays book, which you may or
Mm.
may not be familiar with. So,
No, I don't think I'm familiar with that.
oh yeah, it's fun. Okay. So my little meditation at the bottom is anger is only sadness, sadness is only fear.
Okay.
And so if I'm starting to feel a negative emotion, which is usually like triggered by my mom at this point in my life, because that's not quite been worked through. Then it's like, why am I feeling this way? Okay. And sometimes it'll take me a day or two to process. But
At least it's coming up though, right?
oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you and I both might have lived a part of our life in apathy.
Oh, truly. Yeah. In fact, I still one of the I was on a another woman's podcast a while back, and we were talking about health, and there was a lot of emphasis on external things, detoxifying, diet, things like that. And then I asked her, what health was, and then she kind of asked me what I thought it was, and I said, well, all those things are really important for sure. Um, but having emotional harmony with every emotion is really what I think is overlooked. And that's where what does that mean? Well, first off, we have to recognize that every emotion is precious. Every single one of them has a role. And when I say that, sometimes people cringe a bit, but it just means that your brain hasn't learned that those emotions are quite safe yet. And it will avoid them, it'll stuff them, and it oftentimes will create a symptom to avert you from having to experience it. So, but at least you're in the process of knowing that, feeling them, and reminding yourself of, anger is sadness, and sadness is what?
Fear.
Fear, right?
Right. And one of the other things that Diedrich says, and a lot of this is still all in process and synthesizing, but fear is that primal response. Like there are moments where I'm sitting here and I'm in a very lovely martial arts studio in a really not so good part of town here
Mm,
in South St. Louis City. So, St. Louis has a reputation of being eighth in the world for murder per capita. All right. We do
yeah.
not have a good reputation. It's two zip codes that do that to us.
Oh, is that right?
Just two zip codes. The one that I'm in, and then the one way up north. But back before the pandemic, there was a lot of effort being put into building this particular block. Like there's a pottery studio,
Mm,
a studio for, exchanging clothing. There's an acrobatic yoga and yoga studio, and then here's the martial arts studio. And we're working, we're trying, we're getting there, right?
yeah, yeah, yep.
And at the same time, if someone knocks on that door and I'm not expecting them, the odds of me opening the door are very, very low.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, because that way there's probably three or four methamphetamine houses.
Mm.
And then I drive down that street down there. There have been multiple times where people have guns fling in, and I'm just like, I can't even believe I'm driving down this street right now and I'm seeing this.
And you still do that daily to get to work or to get to that martial arts studio?
Oh, no, 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 no. I mean, it's been a couple of years since
Okay.
I've experienced these things, but in general, yeah, I maintain a behavior of self-preservation And I
Hmm.
choose not to open the door for strangers.
Yeah.
You
Probably
know,
a good idea if you're in that zip code.
hey, I mean, there's logic and reason, right? And at the same time, there's this fear that comes up, and then there's guilt and shame for not being brave enough to open the door to help or whatever the situation might be. And then it's like, okay, that's a little ridiculous because then the people pleasing part of me, which was like such a part of who I was as a child, starts coming out. And then the guilt and the shame of the Catholic. And then I'm like, no, 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 no,
There you
no.
go. There you go. Bring it back. Keep the door locked. Everything's good.
Yeah, yeah. Like, can that be true? No, that's not true. It's not true because it's in the past, right? There is only
Right.
the present moment. And for people who are in pain, which today is a pretty good day for me, sometimes I wake up and I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, what kind of terror did I have during the night, Because I'm a very vivid dreamer. And sometimes I hurt in the morning and sometimes I don't, but at the same time, I don't know a world without pain.
Hmm.
I mean, my first memories
You mean
are
physical
being in
pain?
physical
Okay.
pain. Yeah, being in physical pain. And it's unclear where it all came from. Do I blame the federal government because my dad was dosed with Agent Orange,
Hmm.
which intercalates into the DNA and then is
Was
passed down.
was he a Vietnam vet?
He was.
Okay.
Yeah, he was.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. He volunteered
Yeah.
instead of getting drafted, and so his workload was, I wouldn't say lighter.
Oh,
Uh,
for sure. No.
oh,
I don't know if you knew this. I'm a Marine veteran myself.
wow. Were
I'm
you
a
in the
con
burn pits?
yes, and I'm a combat veteran that's went to Afghanistan and things like that. So I trauma is not just something I was raised in, it's something that I've lived through my life and I feel for veterans as well. And especially I know a couple of Vietnam veterans and they were fantastic guys. Absolutely fantastic people. So,
Yeah, he was one of the funniest people you'd ever meet.
yeah.
Always had a story. Always,
That's
always this much bigger the next time he told it too.
hmm
know?
right.
Very creative, affable, but then also had the different side to him as well. But yeah,
So your physical pain,
oh
you
yeah, my
don't,
physical pain. Yeah, so
yeah.
I don't know where it comes from, but it's something I remember my mom telling me to be quiet in a grocery store because
Hmm.
I couldn't sit still because I was just in so much pain. I got my genetics done.
Wow, even as a child.
I
Okay.
was like 3 years old. I mean, I've been able to access memories from in utero at this point.
Okay. Right. Right.
Now, I mean, and I tell people that, and they're like, what do you mean? How do you do that? And it's just because, like, when the idea was placed in my mind by Roger Weinerth. Do you know who Roger
I
is?
know the name.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, yeah.
Okay.
So Roger lives here in the St. Louis area too.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he actually, for a very long time, I don't know if he still is, was the president of the Structural Integration Association.
Right. Right.
Right. So he and I traded work for 4 years.
Mm.
And so he did a lot of body work on me and helped me access and learn how to access a lot of the old stuff that was in there that was trapped in my body.
Yep.
And so he's the one who kind of opened up the access for me.
Okay.
Yeah, he did. I can't say kind of. He did. Period. And that was in 2015.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it's been about 10 years of body work. And I don't, one of the things about the pain is that it's usually in the same places. I've been to pelvic floor PT. I had that car accident back in September of last year that gave me some pelvic instability and some issues with my left arm, which all
Hmm.
makes sense because of the physical jarring, like going into the ravine. But by the grace of God, like, I'm fine, right? it was just some soft tissue damage, but it woke up a whole bunch of other old
You,
history,
yeah, yeah, it will.
which have been miraculous to work through because
Right.
I didn't know how much other tension I was holding in my body, especially in the neck, and then I had gotten some pelvic floor physical therapy, and she's like, "Oh, we're finding some old stuff in here." And I'm just like, "Yeah, I remember when that one happened, and I remember when that one happened." And you know, my life has shown me a difficult path because of the beliefs that were formed when I was a child. I am very convinced of that.
Mm. That's usually whenever they do. A lot of them, a lot of it goes back to um, conception to around 5, you know. And they say around the age of 7 we've learned half of what we'll know our entire life. Half. So
Hmm.
by 5 we've learned everything we'll know about ourselves. Everything.
Huh.
Um, so yeah, the farther back you can access and work with, leverage, the more leverage it gives you in in your modern life today. So, and it shows that you having the accident, bringing all that stuff up, also shows that uh, you were capable of addressing it then versus stuffing it, and having tremendous amount of pain after the accident. So, and I'm not saying the pain didn't come, but the fact that it like kicked the hornet's nest, kind of sort of speak, show that you could handle the hornets, right? So
Mhm.
that's excellent. Um, what role do you think the subconscious plays in healing or
Well, I think
transformation?
I've been doing some work with hypnosis lately. So among, the body work and the chiropractic and pelvic floor therapy and, addressing more physical access, addressing the subconscious and shifting the subconscious, there's the space that Diederik talks about where like here's point A, here's point B, and it's like here's the ego, right? Forward and
Right.
back, up and down, this whole like little game, right? And like maybe the ego moved just enough to be able to get through and access to the other side, right? And it's in that moment because I call the ego subconscious, even though at times it's so obvious in other people.
Yeah.
um, and forgiveness forgiveness has really been what has been able to help me access point A to point B. And the concept of forgiveness is, of course, they attempted to raise me Catholic. Okay. I mean, I definitely have some Christian moral principles, but I also have studied a lot of Buddhism.
Hmm.
And at a point in my life where I was an atheist. I chose not to believe in a higher power for a very long period of time because of the things that had happened to me. I
Oh,
started
you and me both.
I started doing yoga,
Hmm.
and it was hard. It was hard. I was clunky. I was unaware. I was unknowingly injuring myself. I was like one of my yoga students joked, she's like, "Oh my gosh, Maureen, you sounded like you were a monster or something." And I'm like, "Well, kind of I was." And that's exactly how
So getting into the positions were injuring you and things?
yeah, like I didn't know when to stop.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I see that in a lot of my yoga students that come in, especially if they've had really intense amounts of childhood trauma and abuse, especially sexual abuse.
Hmm.
And
Very
so,
tense, right?
yeah, so it was maybe a year and a half into starting to do yoga on a regular basis. I got into Shavasana. I was in grad school at WashU doing my doctorate, right?
Hmm.
And I needed some stress relief. I feel so blessed. My friend Jennifer finally convinced me to go. And I had this moment in Shavasana laying there where I don't even remember if I had my eyes open or not, but like these blue waves were up on the ceiling and it looked like I was underwater. And I've had some past life regression and QHHT. I mean,
Hmm.
my last life, apparently, I drowned. I was a little boy that drowned at
Mm.
the age of 5, right?
Happens all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So here I am in the waves, and I'm like, holy shit, there's a God. Like that was the thing that snapped me out of it. And then my yoga teacher was like, "Oh, hey, it looks like you're getting really into yoga. Maybe you want to read this book." And it was one of the classical Indian texts, the Bhagavad Gita.
Mm.
And so I read the Gita probably 4 times. And then I got my books that I,
And what is that book exactly?
I'll grab it. So this is the set of books that I bought when I was like 25 years old.
Okay.
Cool classics of Indian spirituality.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
guy has made a really good translation, very
Mm.
understandable. So specifically, there's the Upanishads, which I don't read so much from with my yoga classes because they're kind of long and
Mm.
it's like not too snippety, you know what I mean? And then the Bhagavad Gita, which is the epic
Bhagavad Gita. Okay.
Gita. Oh my gosh, must read. This is like thousands of years old. And it's an excerpt from the Mahabharata.
Let me write that down real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
What is it again? Bog?
The big epic tale is called the Mahabharata, Mahabharata.
Maha what?
Mahaba, B-A, Ra, R-A. I think it's T-H-A,
Okay.
Mahabharata. But
I
then
love it. I
and
love, love, love.
specifically,
I love old scriptures and ancient texts like that where the real wisdom lies.
the Bhagavad Gita is a small excerpt from the
Okay.
Mahabharata when Arjuna goes through a crisis of conscience because he has to fight his family members
Mm.
for like land and ownership.
Mm.
He's like losing his mind. And so he's having the conversation with Krishna or God. And
Yeah.
God is outlining these ethical principles to Arjuna so that Arjuna can find a space of peace and comfort in whatever decision is made.
Right.
So that's the Bhagavad Gita. And then the other one is the Dhammapada, which is basically 24 different verses. Um, it's the Buddha's words.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of other Buddhist texts. I do this one over and over and over and over again with my students. And just like every time I read it, there's like another little piece. So there's another little piece that comes out, and it's like, oh, okay, that experience is this. And then just connecting the dots and like, okay, what can I do to modify my thought patterns? And when was the first time I ever felt this way so that I can clear guilt,
Right.
shame,
Yep.
fear.
That's one reason I love old ancient text because it still has the transformative power that a lot of the s- I'd say this the newer stuff doesn't have. And I don't mean to say newer stuff, but the ancient text is the real transformative stuff, and the stuff that's passed around that's mainstream today is not. It's lost its transformative power, basically.
I
So,
mean, I can read a reading from this, and everybody's like, and I'm like, yeah, you know how old this is? And it's still relevant today
mhm.
because human nature is still human nature.
Right.
See what happens with the AI revolution. We
So,
felt
so basically, in understanding these texts and being in that moment when you saw the water, right? And you
mm.
go, my God, um, what's a belief that you had to unlearn that really helped you physically, spiritually, um, become who you are today?
Well, one of the reasons why I chose to become a scientist is because I wanted to prove that I could know everything.
Oh, yeah. How'd that go?
I was always the know-it-all. I was always the know-it-all. I was always like the go-to for medical information. Like, oh, Maureen, what do you know about this, and this? And I'd be reading and learning and, spitting things out. Had nothing to do with inner knowing. It was about developing the outer knowing versus the inner
Hmm.
knowing.
Right. The thinking from feeling. transition you had, right?
Exactly, exactly. But when it comes down to it, you have to re-ask the question because I do the tangent thing.
So it's that I'm very prone to that. It's okay. I understand that. What's a belief
Hmm.
that you've had to unlearn in order to get where you are now? That you can just think of off the top of your head.
Mm. That there are no mistakes.
That's a really good one. I was reminded of that a few maybe last night. Yeah, that there are no mistakes. It's a the human journey is almost like traveling down a highway and occasionally getting on the rumble strip and waking up and kind of getting back into the smooth,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know. That's what it is. And I've been guilty of being on the rumble strip for, the last few days. So
Hmm. Okay. Well, the messages from the body will tell you, right? Or the messages from the emotions.
for certain, for certain, for
Yeah.
certain, that's why they're there. So,
Like, and
um,
it's like this feeling sometimes, and it's like, sometimes it's deep, deep, and sometimes it's more in the chest, and sometimes I'll lay down on the ground and I'll think like, why is my breathing labored? What am I grieving right now?
yeah,
Or, the last couple days, it's like, oh, maybe I ate something that wasn't quite right, but also literally there may have been a few behaviors that happened that aren't sitting quite correctly with me,
yeah.
you know? And people will decide whether or not they want to work through in relationship or if they just go boop and like, I don't want to deal with this, right?
And what do you find typically with your clients?
What do I
Like a,
find typically
a,
the
a
clients
like
that
a
I
like a
got?
like a mixture of the ones that are wanting to work through or ones that are wanting to avoid?
I mean, it's just like anything, like how do we get through the blocks? Like how many times can I rephrase the same idea until like boop, something opens and a memory unlocks, right? And that's where I feel like hypnosis can help a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm not certified in doing yet, but we'll see what happens next in my educational lineage. But um, a lot of them are just having a lot of pain,
Yeah,
physical pain, mostly. People that have had strokes, people that have had, like you've talked about in one of your posts, like medical ideas placed in their brain. I have,
tremendously.
I
Yeah,
I have three of those right now, right?
right,
And I share what you have to say just straight from your Facebook post. I give you credit, of course, but I'll just copy and paste it and just be like, you need to read this. Please read this. Like this is a suggestion, a strong suggestion. And they'll be like, huh, is you're saying that this could possibly have happened to me? And I'm thinking, it happens to everybody that goes and sees a physician because how else do you think that they're gonna make money? You know?
right. Uh-huh.
Like
And
I
I
don't
no, I that's something that we could call the nocebo effect. Okay. And it's not what I've learned, and I've even seen literature on is it's not just something to the medical model. It is the most significant culprit for it. But it's starting to spill over into where my background is in functional medicine, and the brain takes danger as a direction every time. It never sits idle. So if there's danger or fear as well, it doesn't sit idle. It always takes a direction and moves with it, usually in not such a good way. Like right now, you were describing the neighborhood. When you think of the fear, it always has some kind of direction, whether it's in your stomach or in your heart or something. It's not sitting idle. And there's been a huge disservice in the number of people that have been told things that has basically squashed their ability to access power, to their ability to even think they can. So,
so this hits home, right? And I have to like, do you read my book chapter? Did you read it?
I have not. Oh, I know it's pretty new, right?
Yeah, it was just released last Tuesday.
Okay, yeah, I saw and I saw it's a bestseller and I saw that and I'm like, okay, I got to get my hands on that. But tell
Yeah.
me about the chapter.
Well, I outline some pretty rough stuff because people who know me, like, they just see like the happy-go-lucky Maureen, maybe every once in a while they see me get a little triggered, especially if I feel like for whatever reason, maybe my students aren't safe. Or like if my friends, I feel like they're being attacked in some way. Like I get that, 15th century samurai like sword out and
Yeah.
yeah, being a peaceful pacifist, I don't think will ever be part of my nature, and I'm okay with that. Um, but when it comes down to it, I feel like there are too many ways in this world that people can manifest fear. And the chapter is about the journey that I went through, just in a very like, this is what happened, and this is what happened, and this is what happened, and this is what happened. And then my dad was like, when I decided to change careers, really, he was like,
And
you're
that's where you
you're
stop
not
doing the
you're,
research.
you're not my daughter, pretty much is
Ah,
what he
okay.
told me. Like, you're not
Okay.
my daughter. And I mean, I did my best to still be his daughter, right? But then around that time is when actually he had his first stroke.
Mm,
And then he lost a part of himself. And then he had a second one, and then he lost another part of himself. And then he had the big one back in May of 2022.
mm,
And then there was nothing that, like, I would walk in and he would be mad at me. I'm like, Dad, what's going on? And my mom would be there and she'd be like, remember, Tim, you get along with her now.
mm.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
But
sorry to hear
that was,
that.
it was a part of the experience.
Right.
It really was. And there's nothing I could do to change that man no matter what. He even told me flat out, he's like, I brought you on this planet. You're not going to teach me anything. And I said, okay.
Mm.
All
That's
right.
painful.
Well,
Yeah.
it was at the time because I had taken it personally,
Mm,
right? And then after being able to process the relationship and go through the patterns and, just look back at the way that the way that people treated each other in the house was formatted early on, I can see where that all came from. And I can see how it came from his fear and lack of control and the abuse that he went through when he was a child, specifically from his oldest sister,
mm.
who was not a very kind person to many of the people in the family. But I see where that came from too, right? And so the stories within the family, without going into too much detail, because it's scary stuff. Um, there were 14 kids.
Mm.
And that's pandemonium, it's mayhem, it's chaos. And like there are somehow very good families that can manage that, and then there are the families on the flip side that have no clue how to manage that. And my dad came from the latter, and I know that a lot of his sisters who are older and in their late 60s and early 70s are processing a lot of it right now. I
Right.
just feel blessed that I've been able to process it at a younger age. Like the signs and the symptoms led me to finally allowing myself to open my mind, which was so scary at first and so painful in some ways because crying wasn't allowed in my household.
Mm.
So then when I first started allowing myself to really cry and feel, especially when I went down to the Choose Again El Cielo down in Costa Rica, I like, it was like the block, the block, the block. And then finally I'm just like, what do I have to lose? Except this idea of myself that I've been carrying for
Mhm.
all these years that is not serving me.
Right.
That's
Yeah, it's
that's all
just
I have to
another
lose.
right. And it's just another example of the brain linking emotions is dangerous
Hmm.
and doing everything it can to keep that emotion from surfacing.
Yeah, or wrong, being wrong, bad.
Right.
Yeah, which was probably more on my end. Uh, yeah, people,
Afraid to be wrong? Is that what you mean?
part of it was afraid to be wrong, sure. And then part of it was continually shown that I was wrong because I was a violent child.
Hmm.
And my poor brother. I love him. He's never going to forgive me.
Older brother or
No,
younger
he's
brother?
younger.
Younger. Okay.
Younger. Yeah, the terrorism like got passed down, unfortunately. And so there was a lot of guilt and shame around that too.
Hmm.
And there's literally nothing I can do. Like he's gonna have to take the action to accept the words that I've given him and the understanding, the little pieces of understanding that we've been able to reach over the years. Um, but yeah, like the whole Mel Robbins let them theory,
Mm-hmm.
I just have to let him be angry and mad.
Right.
And I have to let him, you know, stuff the food in his face that he holds down his emotions, right?
You know, the longer I do this, the more I learn that it's in every family.
Mm-hmm.
It's in
Oh,
every
yeah.
family.
It is
Yeah.
in every family, absolutely.
So,
And then, one of the biggest pieces of like gold I feel like I got from Diederik years ago was that, relationships may be fraught with difficulties and betrayal and mistrust and this, but the only real reason that you might want to step away from a relationship and not try to resolve it is physical violence.
yeah.
Yeah. Which, my brother didn't really have much of a choice because we were both kids and we lived in the same house. So.
Mm.
I mean, yeah, I kind of joke about it now, but there were moments I was just getting massages and like tears are flowing in this, I'm like crying in this massage I remember with my massage instructor years ago. We traded too. And I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that to my brother because like something was unlocked in my shoulder blade. And it was
Yep.
this guilt I carried from hurting my brother.
Mm.
And I still don't feel great about it.
Right.
Love the kid. He's a wonderful human. We're all
Right.
wonderful humans. We're all miracles.
We are. Every one of us is a unique expression of the divine, and I think Earth is kind of a trauma school for your soul
Mm-hmm.
because nothing makes sense here. Nothing makes sense. Nothing, nothing makes sense. And so the only thing that does make sense is that this is a school for you to kind of break free, break away, learn that you're really um, have a spark of divine within you, not something outside of you, something within you that that you need to gain access to. And really, I think that for a person to heal, they have to gain access to that, and there can be multiple ways. But that's been kind of that's been the target of my work is getting people back to that spot
Mhm.
and um, knowing that we're all unique expressions of divine. So, but we're on trauma school Earth, and some of us are doing great, moving up the grades, and some of us are moving up grades slow, and some of us haven't even passed the first grade or the fifth grade, and that's okay. I honestly think that if we were on Earth long enough, if we could live to be, let's say, 1,000 years old, okay,
I was thinking Methuselah.
yeah, yep, we would we would eventually get to the point where we hit that level of suffering, where we say, okay, enough's enough. What do I have to do? And the doors would start opening up, where we'd be able to
So you
experience
think
that.
it takes 1,000 years? You don't think you can meditate yourself into it?
Say that again.
So you think it would take 1,000 years? You don't think you can meditate yourself into it?
I think it would take 1,000 years for some people, the ones that we were discussing earlier about some people are open, some people run. There are some people. You named your brother. I've got two brothers that do the same thing. Okay. For my wife, Tiffany, it's both her parents. We just went there um, this weekend for Mother's Day, and immediately it's the medical conditions and the suffering and the tears. And it's like, well, I think that some people it would take that long for them to hit the point when they say there has to be something else to this.
Mhm. Yes, okay.
And that's when the shift would happen.
Mhm.
Many of us have hit rock bottom before, or touched it or something else. And and that's why you're going through this journey at a younger age than your aunts, right? That you were describing.
Yeah.
You've got to the point where you're like, there's got to be something else to this. Sometimes people haven't, and I don't know if it's suffered enough. I hear that, but I don't know if it's that. I think it would just take, they go through times, they suffer, they suffer, they suffer, they suffer, then they die. And I think if they went through, you know, 8 to 9 lifetimes without dying, they would all reach a point when they go, there has to be something to this, and they would start to reconnect to that part of them that has been lost. That's just my personal opinion, of course. Um,
No, no, I appreciate you sharing that. And it's interesting you say 8 or 9 lifetimes because I've always joked like, every human only gets 9 lifetimes in one lifetime. And
yeah.
I feel like I'm on number 6. To be honest with you. I mean, there have been moments where I'm pretty sure I died on the floor and then got back up somehow.
Mm, mm.
Somehow I've been resurrected, right?
Have you had a near-death experience, or you're being metaphorical?
Uh, I mean, I've done ayahuasca.
Okay. Yeah. I've not done anything like that. I'm not opposed to it. The work that I've done in holographic manipulation therapy is able to get past that part pretty easy. Even for the lay intellectual person, like today, one of my clients was a pilot, and I we were just kind of discussing. He had a headache over the weekend, and I said, "Okay, what was taking place?" And he told me some things, and then we kind of fished it out of him that not good enough. I even had him say, "Oh, show me a picture of your airplane." And when he did, he got that feeling in his body, and I said, "Perfect." I don't even know where that came from. When I do this work, I'm usually just a channel. I'm a channel. And I said, "Hey, show me a picture of your airplane." He did, and he started feeling like, "Gabe, when you asked me that, and I showed you that picture of my plane, that my nervous system just lit up." So I'm like, we don't have to have any idea what that is or where it comes from. But we immediately went into age 3, and uh, he was playing a game with friends. And it's what I call the initial sensitizing event. It's one of those mini separations that takes place. And from divine to having a taste of humanity that suddenly shifts your perception. Suddenly you're still connected with divine, but you don't perceive it as such.
Mhm.
Um, and so, we got to that relatively easy. And I've been able to do that to myself multiple times to heal multiple traumas and generational traumas. But I know that ayahuasca can help you get past that. You were talking about 2 levels in the ego in the center, this kind of this and that, this and that. And what I like to do is show people easy way to get there
Oh
without.
yeah, I would much rather not use entheogens.
Mhm.
I mean, I learned some things about my physical constitution. I mean, for crying out loud, I trained to be a geneticist.
Yeah,
And for so long, I was so against knowing about my own system. Like, what's that about? Oh, I don't want the government to have the information. You know what? They can have it. I hope they learn something valuable from it, honestly. If people want to attack me because my genes are a certain way and they want to do something to me, they can't kill me. My soul is eternal. You know,
right.
I know
Yep.
I'm only here for a temporary amount of time,
It's
right?
just an illusion. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they can take this physical body away from me, but I'm remaining in the construct, okay? Anyway, so I found out that I had X mutation, Y mutation, this mutation, that mutation. And then some of them were like not making sense at all. Like, well, if I can't have this and I can't have this, but this makes this, Like, how do I get around this? Okay, so I mean, I was stumping my functional medicine doctor. I mean, he literally,
Was this like MTHFR type thing?
oh, all of them, all
Okay.
of them. So I did the
Oh,
20,
like five or six. Yeah.
did the 23andMe, all the CSV files. He uploaded them into two different cloud-based programs. I think one was called Prometheus, and then
Hmm.
one was called something else. And they didn't give conflicting information. They gave different types of information. And what I learned is that I'm sulfur sensitive, I'm copper sensitive. And so like drinking a Moscow Mule, not the best thing for me. But I'm not celiac, so I can eat wheat, right? As long as it's not loaded with crap. And but I have like 13 mutations for IBS, irritable bowel, which makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. You know, I was told that I was pooping rocks. Like they didn't even have to change my diaper. I just pooped rocks when I was a little kid,
Hmm. Okay.
chronically constipated, right? I was not breastfed. I was bottle fed.
Hmm.
Most children in 1976, 77, right? My mom was not a hippie mom. Um, and then I have like, I can't even remember exactly how many MTHFR mutations I have, but enough to know that drinking orange juice was the worst thing I could have ever done to my body
Hmm.
and what it did to toxify me as a child, which then explains the behavioral problems. I had
Right.
lots of behavior problems. You know, give me a book, stick me in a room, I'm fine, right? Like, leave me alone, I'm fine. But put me in a group of kids, I'm done with all my work before everybody else, and I'm jumping around wondering what else to do. Like, I read more books in school because I got done with my schoolwork so quickly. Like, they didn't know what to do with me. And that's what happens when, and all children are geniuses. That's the problem,
Right.
right? All healthy, even not so healthy, because I was born sick, right? And there were just more and more things piled upon that. But, you know, my mom taught me how to read when I was 2.5. Like literally sitting there pointing out the letters and helping me memorize and helping me understand and helping me learn how to write and do numbers all before kindergarten. And then I'm the freak because here I am getting moved grades ahead. They wanted to move me 2 grades ahead. I probably needed to be moved like 5 grades ahead, but they can't do that. And my parents didn't have the, $20,000 a year to put me in the special school, right? That's just not how I was raised. And every kid has that potential. And that's the scariest thing. Every child is a creative genius,
Oh, yes.
you
And
know?
that's the scientist in you was born through your mom's showing you those things early on
Well, yeah, and like you were saying, the external information. People validate external information.
at that age. Yeah,
And then, the most important thing a parent can do for a child is help them understand that their emotions are okay,
for certain. And
right?
welcome them in their presence, which is either scarce to non-existent, you know, and parents can do their best, but I don't think it fulfills the need that is required. There's scientists right now studying hunter-gatherer tribes to relearn how to parenting because it's been so lost in us, you know. And it's just again, we look back at this, it's definitely generational. Started probably during the Industrial Revolution. The separation of families kind of started in,
Mhm.
and that's when I'd say that's when real trauma started to get passed down. Not that it didn't exist before, but I think it became generational at those times because that's when addictions probably first arose.
It's interesting you say this. So I mentioned I have this like samurai thing, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
heard you talking about protecting your students and
I also have this Viking thing.
oh, so you're right along with me. Okay, awesome.
Hey, yeah. And so I love the TV show Vikings. And it's one of those things that even though it's violent, like it's background noise.
Ragnar?
Oh my
Ragnar? Is that
gosh.
his name?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Ragnar and Agartha and the whole tribe, right? Tribe is the whole point.
right.
These people were going out and marauding, you know,
Hmm.
barbarians. Some people would say amoral, right? The Christians did not like the pagans, right? But they had a different ethical principle and different set of principles, right? They had other freedoms, but then it was like, well, I don't know, back then I think people just killed people. Like,
Yeah.
I'm killing you. Goodbye.
Yep. Yep. You have something I want.
But, so I've watched these characters for probably way too much. Like I've gotten stuck on this series, and every time I watch it, there's just this new level of understanding of humanity that like I look to how things are today in my little box. Because I mean, I don't have children. I'm not in schools. I live my little box right
Hmm.
now. And that's fine. I look at human nature, and one, some of them were just so much more resilient. One of the characters, getting back to addiction, one of the sons of Ragnar ended up having some really bad addiction problems. If you look in like season 5 and season 6, I don't know if you made it that far, but
I watched my, here's the thing. The reason I know about Vikings is because my son, who's 16, is
oh,
a fanatic about the show. And we have Scandinavian blood in us. So he absolutely thrives on the Viking things. Like my son at 16 is a blacksmith, right?
wow.
Yeah. And he I sat down and watched, and I don't watch any shows like that. I just don't. And here's the thing. I did at one point. Um, I my wife and I we watch a show called um, Highway Through Hell about truckers that are basically getting unstuck trucks on a really, really icy road. We
Oh,
watch cooking shows. Um, what else? We watched the show of Forged in Fire. We watched that. We watched one called Homestead Rescue. And it's not that here's the thing. We can tell within just a few moments if we should turn it off, just the way it feels inside of us. But when we first met, we watched the most violent shows. My daughter Arya, her name Arya is from Game of Thrones. We started watching that. And as we went through this journey, clearing our traumas out, I just can't watch that stuff. And my son always gives me a hard time. But I did watch the first season of Vikings, getting back to that, all the way to where, and I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong. I really, really liked it, especially when the the corrupt chief, they decide to go across. This is in season one. They
mm,
go across the water. He told them not to. They do it anyway. I think they find the Christians, they raid them, they come back, and they have all this treasure, and he goes, this is all mine, right? Um, and he ends up fighting that guy and becoming the new, um,
girl,
the what?
girl.
Earl. Yes, he fights that guy, becomes a new Earl. Um, I watched it till then, and my son's like, "We got to catch up," and I'm like, "No, that's good." And he recently talked me into watching Invincible. I don't know if you know about that. Really highly violent cartoon. You say cartoon, but it's bad. So I'm not completely I'm I'm not completely not exposed to that stuff. I haven't watched any of that in a while. My wife hasn't either.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can always fast forward through the battles and stuff like that. There's one character, Ragnar's son, Ivar.
Doesn't he have three or something like that? Five. Okay.
Son.
I and my son keeps showing me the clip, not to interrupt you, where Ragnar, I think, gets killed, and all of the there's just a small group of Vikings versus this like army, and then all of a sudden they just start coming and coming and coming, more Vikings, and his sons are like in the front of that, and he's like, "That's Ragnar's son. Look, that's Ragnar's son," and he shows it to me again, again, 3 to 5 times to the day, just that one clip.
Mhm.
So, and then I saw the one where he
Somebody
came.
send it to me. I'm curious. Which one? Please.
Okay. And then the one where he comes back and he's been gone a long time and
Yeah.
he challenges his son. He's like, are you wanting to be king? Tell me, say it, you want to be king, and none of them want to, you
Yeah.
know. So that's as much as I've been
Okay.
exposed to the
I know.
Vikings.
So, the evidence that people can change is the clearest with the youngest son, Ivar, who was born with deformed legs.
Hmm.
Ragnar was going to kill him, put him out to be gone, right, to the wolves, like they did. And but then he didn't. He couldn't do it. He couldn't kill his own son. So the mother takes care of him. Eventually, they end up in Russia. And in Russia, Ivar gets good food. He gets good food in him because he's treated by royalty, like, oh, King Ivar, come and stay. We'll take care of you, all this kind of stuff. Ivar, who was this bloodthirsty, like the most immoral of the immoral, evil, right? Comes into a situation where he's basically prisoner in Russia with this psychopath, Oleg, and then Igor, who is the child king, but is a ward of Oleg, okay? But poor Igor is getting horribly abused by Oleg, who is supposed to be taking care of him. And Ivar changes.
Hmm.
And even Fitzurk, who is the one who was the addictive tendency, like the non-resilient one, noticed it too. But you see this softening, this shift of like complete abject anger, which Ragnar told Ivar made him unique and the most powerful of all of his sons. But you see the crack happened in one specific moment. Actually, you see where the crack opened and the light could come in, and that light was love for this
Hmm.
boy.
That's where he changed towards his son.
That's where he it wasn't his son. uh his son was born deformed, and so
Hmm.
he had killed his own son. That
Hmm.
was Ragnar didn't kill Ivar, but Ivar killed his own son. But it wasn't really his own son anyway. It's a whole thing. Nonetheless, the light shines through, right? But it's only, I think, when people can find a commonality in experience, which is why I ended up sharing so much in my little 2,200 word passage. Like I
I
think
was
this is,
that was gonna be my question. When
yeah.
did the crack come for you?
Oh gosh. When my ex-boyfriend, who was an ayahuasca shaman, told me that I had borderline personality disorder,
Hmm.
and that was in 2016.
And that's when the crack started for you.
That's when the crack started. And then I started reading about borderline personality disorder. And I have not talked about this to anybody. People can heal from it. It is
Yeah.
definitely a perceptual and behavioral disorder, and it goes hand in hand. I don't want to be that way. I know I can be that way, and I know some parts of society actually think it's normal to be that way. But yeah,
Having multiple personalities, is that what you're describing? Like borderline.
there was a time where things had to get reconnected. Yeah.
Okay.
There were definitely schisms that had happened because of getting raped
Hmm.
a few different times in my life and having to compartmentalize and never
Yeah.
having anyone to talk to about it. and then also not having the language around it, and then also like my brain not functioning properly because I wasn't giving it the nutrition that it needed.
And is that because of the genetic things or
Part of it's
okay?
genetic, and then part of it was the alcoholism.
Hmm. So lots of trauma, lots of pain.
Yeah, yeah. But, it's like what Diedrich says, and I completely agree. Like someone stubbing their toe and falling could be just as bad as, being sexually assaulted as a child. It's still an infliction. Like it could be neglect, it could be abject abuse, it could be infliction of pain. It's the perception that the mind creates around it that creates the devastation and the level of trauma, right?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. It's not the event. Like
The event
Dr. Dr.
severity.
Yeah, Dr. Gabor Mate says these words. He says that trauma is not what happened to you, it's what happens inside of you. And what that is in my definition, it's a trauma in my work. And this it's become such a catchphrase today,
Mhm.
unfortunately. But it's any kind of violation of an emotional or a physical boundary that leaves a wound in the psyche that constricts you afterwards and it maintains for decades. So it's many times people it can be any of that. Me being a veteran, I can tell you, is no different than whenever I do regressions with people because I do not hypnosis regressions, but similar. Okay. And I'm a master level hypnotherapist and I've worked with it for years, hypnotherapy and what it does and definition of it and all that. But a lot of my work, and this is, I think, in my opinion, what I've come across in all the research I've done is the most powerful trauma work is when you can regress someone back to that. Like you're talking about having those childhood memories. When you can access those memories and change them there correctly, that's when you can really shift the seed planting of a problem and it changes the perception of how you view life after that. Um, but whenever I do a lot of regressions, there's times whenever a person has something pretty heinous, autoimmune or something like that, and we go back and they were 2 years old and they had a toy taken from them at a particular moment, and the loss of autonomy. And oftentimes the adult is looking at the scene going, "Hey, it doesn't look that bad," and I have to remind them, what's that younger version of you experiencing? There's a loss of autonomy, a loss of suddenly not being able to make a difference, not being able to choose.
Mhm.
And that can be devastating, just as devastating as a bully on a playground, or even experiencing something in combat, loss of a friend or a comrade in combat. And here's what's really interesting: me being a poster child for this stuff. Every time I've ever worked on something related to military, it had nothing to do with military. It always had to go back to something prior to. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, yeah. And I tell my clients that, and I remind myself all the time, it is not what is happening in this moment that is making me feel this way.
right. So
Something
how
that's not healed yet.
that's right. How do you know when someone's ready to transform?
Ooh. I feel it. I feel it in every part of them. I can't remember exactly when it started happening. Probably as I was doing yoga. God, I was dating this guy. Oh my gosh. And he had all these friends who were a bit older than me and kind of getting sort of crunchy and old and stuff like that. I mean, I was in my 20s at the time, and I think they were in their 40s.
Hmm.
And they'd be like, "Oh, Maureen, you do yoga, blah, blah, blah. Can you help me?" And I'd be like, push them up against the wall. And I would just hit these trigger points. And all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, now you can stand up straight. And they'd go like this. You'd hear pop, 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 pop. And they're like, oh my gosh, I haven't stood up this tall in years. I'm like, hey, congratulations. There's been this knowing inside of me. I was never like
Hmm.
that as a child. So I don't know when exactly the transition happened. But
But you
flash
went from a thinker to a feeler, and that's what you're,
That's exactly what happened. Like
yeah,
I couldn't literally tell them why I knew something. I just knew. So I sit in front of a client, and sometimes there's this meditation that I learned when I was in massage school. Tom Tessero, the headmaster, had taught me have one thermometer, 1 to 10, willingness to learn, one thermometer, 1 to 10, willingness to change. Okay. And then if they're 10 and 10, they might say that just because the ego says, oh yeah, I'm open to,
sure, sure, sure,
but then you take them through a meditation of the thermometer going from like 100 down to 60, maybe down to 50. At that point, they don't want to go any lower. At least I didn't want to go any lower than 50. I was feeling yucky. And like, okay, we're slowly going to meditate that thermometer back up to 100. And then everybody in class would open the eyes. This was during my Reiki level 2 training at the Healing Arts Center. And I was just like, oh, wow, I feel totally open right now. And everybody wanted to be there. But at the same time, there was like fear and hesitation and, oh, what's going to happen to me? Something bad is going to happen. So took them out of the fear through the thermometer meditation. Sometimes I use that with my clients. Like,
mm,
how willing are you to learn and how willing are you to change? And sometimes they start at a 60. Okay, well, we're just going to let you sit at the 60. We're going to take it down a little bit, and then they're like, oh, yuck, that doesn't feel good. And I'm like, okay, are you ready to take it up from here? That's when people I feel are really blocked or they're in complete disbelief. Right. Like I'm like, well, sometimes I'm asked, well, why do you want to be here if you don't think I can help you in some way? Right.
right,
So
right,
you got to be in their face. And I think the best thing that ever happened is that like I'm not afraid to lose clients anymore.
yeah. That's a lot of freedom too.
Yeah. And they'll lose themselves.
Right.
Lose themselves. And, I'm always happy to give names and suggestions. Like I mentioned, a particular
Hmm.
client earlier. It's like, maybe you should talk to this guy. He's like 70 and, he's like, can it help with pain relief? And I'm like, oh, yeah, it'll help with pain relief. Probably not in the way that you think. It's not going to be, prescription pills or anything like that.
Mm, hmm.
He's helped some other people that I know. So, you can go on your merry way or you can you can stick with me, right?
Yeah.
And just because I already know your backstory, do you really want to waste all that time and money telling him your backstory too? Because I'm not sure. I'm sure I'm not going to take that time.
Yep.
That's not my job. My job is to be completely present and connected. And through emotional freedom technique is when I started learning how to do that. Being able to grade pain,
Yeah.
like on a scale of 0 to 10, how are you feeling right now? Even then, some people are like, oh, yeah, I'm like a 3. And I'm like, actually, you're probably an 8.5 right now.
Yeah.
So how do you end up training a person to have a better understanding of their feelings?
Mm, me?
Yeah.
Um, well, that's a good question. Because I do have a university where I teach PhD doctors how to be super healers. So one of the first things I do is I show them that first off, make it real simple. Everything in the human experience, the dynamics is operated by a body feeling, an interoceptive response, without a doubt. And those body feelings are feelings we want more of or feelings we want less of. And whether they know it or not, those feelings are basically a window. So whenever somebody comes in and they talk about, um, uh, for instance, this client, or I can talk about somebody that has cancer or autoimmune. The first thing I'll do is show them a list of personalities that are proven to correlate to these kind of illnesses. So with cancer, you're going to see a lot of outwardly focused. They tend to really be concerned about how others think. They feel like they can't disappoint anyone. They feel like they must They're responsible for how other people feel. And I sit and talk with them and they go, "Oh, my husband, my husband, oh, he's going through this with me and my kids, my husband." And I say, "See that right there? So I want you to think about something that would pamper yourself. I
Mm.
want you to pamper yourself. Picture yourself. What is something you would really enjoy that you just can't do it? You just won't do it." And I have to kind of fish it out of them. But I used to love getting my nails done. I used to love doing this. And I say, now I want you to tell yourself, I'm going to get my nails done. And there's an icky feeling that shows up. And that shows us a reason. Then we look for a reason behind that. And then there's some kind of wound behind that. And once we can dissect that, go into it, find the ISC. And I teach this is one thing about hypnosis. I've went through a lot of training with it, and some are really good and some are not so good as far as trainers. To be a really good regressive, and there's a lot of NLP people. Oh man, a lot of, and I've worked with so many of them, and I've been around so many of them that say this: regression is not necessary. We can do timeline work, and it's not the same. Nowhere even close to the same.
Mm.
And regression work is the old school stuff that hardly exists today, and there's hardly any really. A lot of the people that knew what they were doing when it came to this have passed on, and they did it before the internet. So at best you might find some old VHS work of the golden standard for like, you know, and I've gotten records of their stuff.
Mhm.
But basically it's being able to get to that initial sensitizing event because it might not be as easy as you think. The first one, you ask them to take you to a scene, situation, circumstance that has everything to do with this feeling of you not being able to pamper yourself, and suddenly they're 21 and she's, 55 or something, 21. Then, and we have to investigate, is that where we need to go? First impression? No. Is that the key event that has everything to do with this feeling? No. Then it's 12, then it's something else. Then suddenly we're a different person, you know, someone, a relative or a man or something else. So it's detective work because what I've learned is if you give the subconscious mind a choice between going to the real sticky, icky, gooey issue that has everything to do with that or something else, it'll oftentimes kick you off in some field and you're in 1800s Ireland with big rolling hills and bagpipe music in the background. They're like, "Oh, this is great. This is really great." And it's because it'll can redirect you. It has nothing to do with what they needed to do to heal. So it's about being a detective and being really, really clear on and having them know what's going on if we're at the spot, if we're not at the spot.
Yeah.
And getting to that ISC, once we get there, and we can change that. Then we do a batch release, which is really, really, really unique. We take
Mm.
every past version of them that's ever had any experience like that. It could be anywhere from 50 to 5 to a million to where, so if you were hurt, if you were guilt, if something, it's not just you. There's literally a holographic imprint. And when I say holographic, what I mean by that is if I had a magnet, I
Mhm.
broke it in half. If I had a red and gray magnet and you see these, you put it on iron fillings, you'd have two poles, right? Well, if you break that magnet in half, what do you think happens to those poles?
They reshift.
They reshift. So what would you have if you broke a magnet in half and then put it into iron fillings?
Then you would have two north and south poles.
Exactly. You would have two north and south poles, not just a north and not just a south over here. And if you broke it in half, and now you have 16 pieces of one magnet, you'd have 16 north and south poles. So it's a small glimpse of how holographic work is. And each version of you that's ever been traumatized is a shattered version of the self. Like you mentioned when you were overwhelmed, it's like a bottle gets shattered, a glass bottle, and all those fragments become little whole versions of you, not a north and south pole, but the entire whole version of you. And so we have to collect all of them and establish harmony, give them either revenge, because I have found that oftentimes it's not forgiveness that they need,
Huh.
it's revenge.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, revenge. And if when I say that,
Our
yeah,
Vikings.
yes, exactly. And there could be a reason when you watch that, you're like, yeah, you get a release, you know? There's could be a reason. So revenge or comfort, where we have them get a chance to, every part of them gets to experience a present, emotionally available, completely in tune, consistent uh, parent or caregiver. And that might be their version of their mom and dad healed. Sometimes maybe they can't even picture their mom and dad healed, so it's someone else, but it still fulfills the purpose of that whenever we do all that. And that's in one session. That's in one, it's like a systematically with no scripts going in and doing all this and then having a chance to refine that initial event. Um, After that, I'll have that person with cancer say, I want you to pamper yourself. And they go, no problem. And they go like this, holy cow. They realize that, it's been a shift that dramatic in their personality to where I had a woman who had third occurrence of breast cancer come to me and they've tried everything. I want to segue into the supplement realm here in just a moment with you, but they've tried everything and she tried everything and eaten everything perfect, doing everything right, and the cancer just spread. And whenever I started working with her, one of the things was she's like, I can't tell my parents I have cancer. Oh, it'd kill them. Literally killing her. Literally, I can't tell them that. Oh my gosh, I can't tell them that. It's that personality. That's my litmus test. I can know more about them than any lab work just by, just looking at that. And then that gives us a window of where we need to change that. Um, so once we finished that, and with her, it was, it took maybe a couple of months of every week working on different ISCs, working on different things, just compounded over and over and over different stuff. Lots of brain retraining. Um,
Mhm.
at the end of that, within a couple months, I was asking her, "Have you told your parents?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, it's on them." And then she's just like, "Gosh, no," you know what I mean?
Like they don't
But
even know that this stuff, they don't, yeah.
well, the words come out of them, and they're almost surprised that they're suddenly protecting their boundaries, that they're suddenly, you know, able to say, well, I've already told my parents, and that's on them if they get upset that I have cancer. That's on them. And then they're like this because they've went their whole life concerned. But the automatic default setting now is that that's on them. That's on them. And then they're just kind of like surprised at their own words.
Hmm.
People that can't say no, things like that. So that's just kind of a glimpse of the work that we do to shift people's personality. Because
Yeah.
oftentimes I find that if we don't address that properly, it'll be surface level at some point, or the things can tend to come back. And this is after a, over a decade of doing functional medicine work, helping people reverse diabetes type 2, um, all kinds of things. And this may ruffle feathers, but what I've learned is if they come in and we're doing some superficial work, acupuncture and giving them supplements and they're detoxing and things like that, oftentimes it's almost like placebo because in 4 to 6 months, they start feeling lousy again.
Yeah, yeah, I saw your post about that, and it's it's been mostly the emotional healing that has taken me stepwise to feeling better and better. And, you know, for me, it's been structural, right? After the car accident, I had my $5,000 of med pay. So I
Mm,
went to my favorite chiropractor who does soft tissue work as well and started releasing all of these things. And like, especially all through here that I had no clue was so blocked because I was pain free before the accident. That day that I had the accident, I had no pain. The other time that that happened in my life was when I blew out my right knee. I woke up, I was pain free, I felt amazing. that's the day my knee blew out. And I'm like, there's something to this.
So tell me, okay, so you had a car accident, and how bad was the car accident?
Oh, you can look at it on Facebook back in September. I shared the video. It went beep into a ravine.
Okay, okay, that's what you were talking about
It
earlier.
was my brand new car. Like
Oh
eight.
no.
Oh no, everything's fine,
Yeah.
like, insurance covered it and whatever. I mean,
So
it's
how, so like what approximate speed?
so what had happened, I was on a country road and it was dark and it was my brand new car and I was paying attention to the GPS because I don't see so well at night. And there was no lighting. There were a few signs, but the brightness of the screen, I think, distracted me.
Mm-hmm.
And the GPS was lagging because of poor signal.
Oh no.
And then I thought the turn was coming later than it actually did. And so I went down into the ravine and I just was like, okay, God, here we go. And the airbag deployed and my right arm got like jammed up and I had just like a little bit of a burn from the airbag.
Airbag, yeah.
I literally was like, I'm okay. And I'm like, oh crap, the car's gonna explode, which it didn't, but it was a thought that crossed my mind. So I ran out of the car and up, and then these people saw me and they're like, do you want us to dial 911? And I was like, yeah, that would be great. And then I walked back down and I got my purse out and I walked back up. And then by then the cops had come and it was like weird,
And so you were pain free.
surreal.
Were you
Oh
you
yeah, I mean
okay.
my adrenaline was like crazy. It wasn't until
Right.
days later that my body woke up. I went and got a back x-ray of my whole spine. I went to the emergency room. I walked in and I was like, "Yeah, I had a car accident like 2 days ago and I just want to make sure my back isn't broken before I start getting chiropractic treatment." They got me in right away. Like right away.
Hmm.
Like, there were people waiting for hours. They got me in right away. And they're like, oh, we just so happen not to be busy in that department. And I'm just like, okay. And, everything was fine. No broken, nothing.
And did you have any pain return then? Or you're talking about the
Oh,
pain
yeah.
right
I
here.
mean, well, the neck wasn't the most bothersome thing. It has been my left leg.
Hmm.
So I still have some issues with my left hip and
And
probably
this was
more of
back
it.
in September, you say?
Yeah, I know. I know. So
Okay.
it's been quite a amount of time. I mean, I'm doing squats and I'm doing the internal rotations and, exercising it does seem to make it better. Um, but yeah, there's an emotional component to it. I even went and got the pelvic floor therapy because I'm like, maybe it's that. And she was a really wonderful therapist and she found some things in there that was like, it's good that you're processing this. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that one.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I relive this stuff like so somatically, and I don't know how
Mm,
many people are out there that are like me with that, you know, that it's just very easy for me to access emotional content based on injuries.
right. And again, it has to do with, I think it has to do with a lot of you're eager, you're open, and your capacity. In other words, like this, I'm drinking this like beet juice drink, right? If your capacity's full, like if this glass was all the way full, you do a couple drops and it spills over, your body's not going to let you process that much.
Ah,
If you've drained it to where your stress load's like this much,
yeah.
you have something happen and your body will say, "Hey, we can handle it. We can handle more drops in here. No problem. We can handle it, a couple squirt or maybe in a little shot glass and we're good." So it has to do with your capacity to handle that based on your current load. And I think around 35 to 45 years old, our load starts to really expire. That's why people start to have symptoms around that age. 35 to 45 is when symptoms really start to show up in most people. It's because their cup is full. Their subconscious is like, we've stored this crap for too long. We can't do it anymore,
Yeah.
you know? So,
And I think the younger kids, the 35-year-olds, they've had enough content available to them for long enough that they see it and subconsciously they start waking up a little bit earlier than like boomers, let's say, or people on the elder end of Gen X,
Right.
you know,
That certainly could be it.
or they hit retirement and all of a sudden they have all this time and they start feeling and noticing all the things that they didn't have an opportunity to, like you said, because their cup is too full.
Right.
I'm just carrying a full cup. Yay, I don't get to drink from it. I just have to carry it.
Yeah, very much so. So what did you let's segue into the supplement
Oh yeah,
world. You were wanting to talk to me about that.
yeah, yeah. So, um, when I was down at school in Florida, there were some basics that were recommended, and then I ended up changing a few things just for my own personal consumption because of the MTHFR and going methylfolate versus, full on folic acid. Um, but that's really what I feel like that's my daily thing. I
Okay.
love my fulvic humic. I love my methylated B vitamins. I really think they keep me sane and grounded, but just sensitive and otherworldly feeling enough, if that makes sense.
Mm,
Because I've definitely flirted with the edges of psychosis in my life
mm,
due to
mm,
drug use, for example, and I mention it in my book, so it's out. Maureen's been through a lot of psychedelics and a lot of other stuff. Thank goodness nothing that ever got me too hooked, right? Thank goodness for that. Um, but yeah, the methylated B vitamins, I don't mess with that. Like, I guess I could try to go off of them for a little while and see what happens to my system, but I like being sane and present.
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So,
And
so I think
there's nothing I don't think there's anything wrong with being sane and present.
yeah, yeah, and then there's the next level stuff, which, back in 2017, I went through functional medicine. I had gotten a stool test done, and I feel really grateful my functional medicine doctor did not tell me how sick I was.
Mm,
After we had gone through the process, and we were actually in a relationship for 3.5 years. He was my boyfriend first, and then he became my functional medicine doctor. I'm like, am I sure I really want to do this? But he handled it in a way that later he told me I was the sickest person he had ever met, which
mm.
totally
Based on the lab work,
my gut profile.
gut
And
profile.
he had done all of the, writing in the things with my blood. I had like 14 blood markers out of range.
Mm,
I had fallen into jungle water when I was in Peru in early 2016. And
mm.
I have no doubt I was infected with something that took over my brain, right? And then it was just a matter of getting my immune system strong enough again. So I think he decided I was around 87 years old when I was like 41.
Wow.
Yeah. So it took me he's like, yeah, I think it'll take you about 7 years. And I'm like, 7 years, like that blew my mind. But he was right. He was right. And it also involved a
Of
breakup.
detoxing, getting nutrients, things like that.
Oh my gosh. I mean, and ultimately what it came down to was self-hatred, unprocessed self-hatred.
Yeah, that's here's the thing, when you were naming all that off, I was like, what about the real deficiencies, which is the self-care?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was eating all the right things and I thought I
Yeah,
was eating all the right things, and at the same time, I was a bad drunk for a really long time.
right.
Right. And so I was definitely nutritionally depleted. That all happened when I was in biotechnology sales. I was alone on the road. I proved to myself over and over again through relationships how unworthy I was.
Mm,
Anyway, I didn't go into that in the book, but there's always more. And well, what it comes down to is that like, yeah, I think the human body does need some basic things in order to function properly that we're not getting from our food.
right, for certain.
Yeah.
And
Some people call it Shilajit, some people call it fulvic humic. Some people, I went through a
and
very
I take Shilajit.
wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
It's great stuff, as long as you know you're not contaminating yourself with a lot of heavy metals. And even if you are, welcome to being the Mad Hatter in this world.
Yeah.
Um, Mercury is interesting what it does to people and how it blocks metabolic pathways. But it's the belief systems. You can't think your way through this stuff. It's a matter of feeling through it. Is oregano oil going to help destroy some parasites? Sure. If you got stuff that you're pooping out and you know that you have parasites, oregano oil is a great thing to use. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that's a lot stronger that I'm not allowed to prescribe because I'm not a physician, right? That people are taking now, and they have the most devastating, full-blown stage 4 metastatic cancer, and it seems to be helping them.
Talking about ivermectin, things like that.
Benzosol.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, it's helping with their pain. It's helping them get through it. It's helping their body restructure and get strong again. But again, it's the belief systems
I think so. I think so. Um,
because that deep sense of unworthiness and not being deserving of being here that I had processed in Costa Rica, which was a in utero memory. It was during transformational breath work.
okay. When that memory came up.
Yeah, Stan Groff.
Hmm.
Method, right? And so they do the music in this, and I don't know what it is about the wiring in my brain, but about 5 minutes into the breathing, I am in. Like I am in a whole other place. I mean, the places that I visited in my brain were like, oh my gosh, there's no way this could ever be true. And then I'm like, stop gaslighting yourself,
Yep.
more.
Yep.
Stop it.
That's the dynamics that I show people about the subconscious mind. As I said, it always answers first. It answers accurately, picking it up, and you'll have a real strong urge to want to edit that information. So when that comes up, and I have them repeat that verbatim over and over again. So when we go in, there's like no resistance, and that's basically it. So
Yep. The first thing
lots
is
of st
always the right thing.
yeah, lots of stuff on that. So you kind of want to go into the supplement world. I think for some people, those things can be really helpful. I think that they're utilized a lot without addressing the self-belief issue that kind of you were talking about. What's your experience on that?
Uh, the physical vessel shouldn't be denied what it needs to find perfect health.
Right?
Um,
I
and,
You can't.
if there are the means, right?
Yeah.
If financial means, it's like, okay, let's get your body back in working order. Let's do that gallbladder detox. Let's do the things so that your body, because, yeah, like the beautiful client with the wrists,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
She's like, I lost like 5 pounds doing that gallbladder cleanse. And I'm like, just keep those channels open, baby, because like there's gonna
Yeah.
be more. Get in the sauna, start sweating, because her goal is to anti-age and get her,
Mm.
to exercising every day and feeling good and like being a healthy 67-year-old woman. Healthy, right?
Hmm.
Not just sitting around and feeling like crap all the time.
No, I love a good sweat. I mean, there's really nothing like it, you know.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think about the cold plunge?
I I have not done a lot with it. I will say this. I think that it helps the stress response, like, and the dopamine kind of sets you up for the day. I myself, whenever I take a shower in the morning, I'll crank it all the way cold just for a little while, when I get finished. And it seems to just kind of a good, healthy stress response. Things like that I think are helpful. Like anything else, it can be taken to the extreme, and it can be definitely um, relied on a lot. But I think overall, I think it's got some good therapeutic value.
Yeah, yeah. I saw recently, and I don't know if you saw this, that women don't need it as cold.
I haven't come across that.
Yeah, if I find it again, I'll share it with you for sure. Just like the rule of intermittent fasting for people who
Right.
for weight control and
Hmm.
blood sugar control. I had read 1410 is best for women.
Okay.
Like more than that starts stressing us out too much.
That's important to recognize. Right.
Yeah, there are important biological differences.
Yeah, for sure. And like you kind of mentioned genetic differences. And I don't think it's a good idea for you to, if you're ever going to wean off of them, if you're ever going to try, like you kind of mentioned, without, without first like preparing yourself properly. Because
Oh, I mean, I'm okay. But
yeah,
if the you know what hits the fan and all of a sudden things aren't available to us, right?
that's right. Um,
Then what'll happen? I don't know. I mean, like I've pictured scenarios in my head and it's like, hmm, that could be interesting. And then it's like, well, we'll see what happens, right?
yeah, yeah,
All the stories in my mind of who I want to become. And I think that who knows what's going to happen. I don't want to call it.
right. There's so much of that going on that a big majority of the work, and I'm sure that you agree, is really having clients feel safe. The people that come into your studio and work with you right now in the neighborhood, having that safety is very, very important. Um, and that it is, and to know that we are capable of doing things beyond our understanding. Just for example, this is a true story. I asked my wife, "Where do you want to go eat?" And she goes, "I want to go eat at Dairy Deal." Now, where we live in the Ozarks in Oklahoma
Okay.
and the Ozark Mountains, and there's a nearly off the grid. If you want to really get a nice, decent restaurant, you're gonna have to drive probably 40 minutes to Broken Arrow, which is a really nice area of Tulsa. And we go there probably 2, 3 times a week. We got no problem with it. But Dairy Deal is a place down the road that it's like a fast food joint, and it's an old, old, old school when like their stuff tasted like it did, back in the 70s, or
So like
80s.
real beef and
Like,
stuff like
yeah, that's
that. Okay.
exact, and it's survived through everything. And so she wanted a real burger from this place, and I was like, that sounds great. Um, and our naturopath, we have a naturopath that does it's not muscle testing, that's something else, but he does that distance wise, and he's our family doctor. And he's told her, you cannot have gluten. You just cannot. And she stopped, and swelling and everything kind of went away, and it helped. So she has trained herself, and we went and had that burger yesterday. And I said, how you feeling? She goes, not a problem. No, I felt great. This thing was great. Not one little spot, you
Yeah,
know?
good.
And and what I'm finding is that the brain controls about every molecule in your body.
Oh yeah.
And it's so neuroplastic that you can give it the right feedback. And I think that when you do that, everything just kind of follows along. And we can take, because I've done all that lab work, and you can take lab work and look at things, but people change so dynamically, and the beliefs they have about themselves literally will change the shape of their molecules, and it'll change the function of their molecules. And Candace Pert's work is just one of those pioneers that gives us a glimpse of how powerful that those things really influence us on such a deep level. And so that was a true story. She had a fast food burger yesterday, had apps just enjoyed every bite of it. And, a few years ago, that would have really made her heart race, made her joints swell, everything just flare up,
Yeah, well,
you know.
fantastic. I know you have dived deep into like Candace Pert and Joe Dispenza and so many others and it is the belief system that's set up, right? So alcoholism and drug addiction, there's that part of the brain where it's like, yes, 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 I want that, I want that, I want that, right? And then
Mhm.
there's the level of I need it, right? And so like if I perpetually believe that I need something in order to keep me alive or to make me function or numb my pain or whatever it might be, then I'm setting myself up for that.
Right.
The question is, do I really need it or can I live without it? Because that's what God is showing me right now. Like abundance on some levels, but falling away of a lot of other things and people and attitudes and
Hmm.
the shift is happening, right? But it's perpetually
Yeah.
happening. And who was it that said like, a lot of us are going through it now, so if and when the time comes, everybody else is going through it is going to have someone to listen to.
Right. I've heard that many times. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and
It's been repeated on different levels.
it
And
is.
and it is kind of taking place now. Like if we're in trauma scores, and here's the thing, I could sit here and talk about how many toxins are in the world. How I could sit here and talk about everything from Fukushima to 75% of our rain having glyphosate in it. There's no escaping it. And I think the answer is not going to be just relying on heavy duty detox. Sometimes they might be required in certain circumstance, but I think our way out of this as a species is going to be tapping into this inner part of us that's exquisitely sensitive. And what the real thing is about this is the first thing I teach people is, look, you've been diagnosed and you got all this stuff, and what we were talking about previously, and I said, but here's the absolute truth, not a relative truth. Not a relative truth. And man, there are so many relative truths. Who can you listen to? Methylene blue, it's good, it's bad. This guy says vegetables are good. This doctor says no. This doctor says all meat. This doctor says don't eat that. This doctor says that'll tear you up. It's just so much relative truth out there. But here's what I can tell you is an absolute truth. You're made of quantum particles. Basically, all space within your atoms is filled with creative energy, and all space within everything, phones, pens, drinks, all space is filled with creative energy. It's not just empty space, creative frequency. And I'm an energy worker. Like you mentioned, Reiki, right? I'm a best practitioner. Okay, Sue Mortar.
Okay.
And that's what I did in chiropractic. Now I do everything. I can find that I can help people so much more by helping them shift their perceptions than anything else, right? Um, but all space is filled with creative energy, creative frequency. It's amenable to suggestion. That's another absolute truth. The whole nature of you and your body is responsiveness.
Mhm.
And the third one is it works in a deductive manner. That means it can work in a bad or a good way.
Hmm.
It can work in a positive or a negative way.
Hmm.
And if we are just so glued on everything going wrong with the world today,
Yeah.
and I get it, I'm not naive about it. What are we setting ourselves up that's exquisitely sensitive? We have an exquisitely sensitive inner self that's always taking, always listening, always remolding, always reshaping, changing us every moment through the day. And I think that power is what we need to lean on.
For sure. I think every person could be served to understand the map of the scale of consciousness.
Yeah, Dawkins,
Hawkins.
Hawkins,
Yeah.
yeah, David
David
Hawkins.
R.
I
Hawkins.
blended the two together and said Dawkins.
So I meditate in the shower. I don't know, there's just something about the water that like my brain goes woo and it lets me go to the place, right?
Here's the thing. I was doing this in the shower today. So I hear you.
I was like, okay, I'm putting myself in a vulnerable position by coming onto a podcast, which is like the first one I've done for a while and the first one since the book came out, right? And I was like, kind of like, am I excited? Am I nervous? How am I feeling? So I started muscle testing myself and I'm like, 470, that's it. Come on, I can do better than that.
I'll tell you what, 470 is still pretty good though.
Oh no, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. But
It's
I'm
up in the blue purplish, I believe.
yeah,
Just kind of,
yeah. But I was like, I can do better than that. And then I was like, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how am I today? And I hit 10 out of 10. And I was just like, okay, it's all relative considering this is my body system, right?
yeah.
And the fascial distortions and the injuries and the times that I've been cut open and all that kind of stuff, like it's my 10 out of 10. And I was like, 10 out of 10, that's not bad. Okay, where am I on the scale? This is the first time I've ever done it, like just so consciously. So I appreciate
Mm.
the situation that you've allowed me to be in today. So
Hey, my pleasure.
know that, it was wonderful. So what do you think about the rhesus factor?
The rhesus factor.
Yeah, like the blood negative factor, the O negative,
Oh,
positive, all that.
yeah, that's interesting. The one where it can actually change and actually go, become quite toxic for the next baby, right? Is that what
So
it is? It,
that's when a negative woman is having relations and a genetic positive baby. Yes.
right. And her immune system will actually go after the next one, correct?
Erythroblastosis.
Um, I will be honest with you. Your expertise in genetics is probably far greater, and I that's not something that's like my lane. I know of it,
Yeah.
um, but
So you've
other than
never heard of like the eat for your blood type?
oh yeah, I sure have. Yeah,
Yeah, but that
sure have.
doesn't do with positive negative, right? So the whole thing about positive negative is that positive, rhesus factor positive people are of the earth, and rhesus factor negative people are of the stars.
Ah, okay. I've heard a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. I saw a podcast the other day about it, and I was just like, okay, are my beliefs serving me in this moment?
Right. That's yeah, that's that I tell you what, it's always healthy to have those conversations. I we own my wife and I are founders of what's called Psychosomatic University. And one of the things that I do in that is facial diagnosis that dates back from Ayurvedic and traditional Chinese medicine of over 5,000 years. And it dates back to elements that whenever I work with people, I want to show them what element they are, teach them what element they are. Basically, look at any kind of repressed emotions, things like that. We can see traumas in that on the face.
Right.
And when that's healed, it does disappears. That's like the real anti-aging stuff,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Um, but teaching people about their elements and what they are and what they work in harmony with, I think is really helpful. Um, but the RH factor, the people from Earth, the people from the stars, it's truly fascinating. I haven't dove into that, not yet.
Yeah,
So
it's coming, right? People are kind of opening up to how perhaps some of the people in the spotlight are not necessarily who we think they are, and that's all right. I was at a party.
everything's a lie.
I don't know, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, not really. You were at a party though?
Right? Or wherever our brains are. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was at a party in Las Vegas back in 2010 with a friend of mine who was an ex-methamphetamine addict and a prostitute.
Mm.
And so we went to a party after Cyndi Lauper's concert, and I was overhearing a conversation about aliens because we were in Las Vegas and everybody was messed up. And I had a few, I don't know, champagne beverages, whatever. And I said something, and they're like, "You are 100% human." And I'm just like, "What is that supposed to mean?" But I don't know. Does it matter? I mean, in the moment with and when the beings decide to make themselves known, I think that it's fear that's going to be the major guidance system as to whether or not there's going to be an issue.
And I think you're right. I think that's part of it. I think is the person going to be, are certain people going to be able to view that? What I mean by that is, does it fall out of their perception?
Like the idea when the Columbus boat came and the Native Americans, like they didn't understand the concept of a boat.
I think it was Magellan
It was,
when he came upon the shores of Gibraltar, or was it Tripolago? Yeah, a painting. There's a painting of that, and um, Darwin and Magellan showed up on, I don't know if it was Gibraltar or something else. I think it was something else. I can't think of the name. But right, the ships were in the distance. The rowboats came up, and the natives were like, "How'd you get here?" And they said, "Those ships," and they weren't able to see it. There's tribes in Africa right now. They found that if I showed them a screen and played a video on this, they wouldn't be able to see the video because it falls outside of their perception. So I think that those kind of things are going to be who is able to comprehend that kind of thing, and who isn't, who, and I mean on a very unconscious level. But I think some of it's already here. I think I went to a thing with Greg Braden years ago, and he showed us kind of the origins, and it was truly fascinating. What there was, basically the evidence points at this. Around 200,000 years ago, CRISPR technology, gene technology was done to us.
sure.
Yeah.
What do you
And
think is done in our immune system?
what's that?
What do you think is done in our immune system? That's exactly what I studied for my doctoral
Hmm.
dissertation was how genes rearrange with one another, called
Right.
PBJ recombination,
Yeah.
which is ordered and chaotic.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh,
And that's
perfect.
something. And that's something. But the beings that likely did this on us had these
Oh
huge
yeah.
heads, right? And they were probably from the stars, you know. So do I think that's some far-fetched? Not at all. Not at all.
But
So,
again, if we are living in a holographic construct,
which there is a lot of evidence that, David Bohm, Einstein's protege, said that at the atomic level, subatomic level within the atom, it's completely formulated like a hologram. And then Carl Pribram's work, a neurophysiologist, said that our brain works like a hologram, and I found that to be true. So if the subatomic level in our brain, we can point at those things and say they're holographic, well, what else in the world isn't then? You know what I mean? So it's interesting. And that means that everything is within,
mm,
and everything is within, and we see some of that in little glimpses, little tiny windows here and there, of what's possible. And I think it has to do with our deepest. Because when we say belief, there's people like you were describing the thermometer. They can go, oh, yeah, I want to go down I'll do 60, and you say, okay, let's do 55, and they go, oh, that's too much. Um, there's beliefs we know about, and there's beliefs we don't know about,
right.
and those are the dominant ones. And they've been mathematically formulated to about 99.994% of us are beliefs we don't know we have.
Hmm.
So when we want to be aligned, it's like we have to have all those beliefs lined up.
Yeah. Well, I guess the question is are we at peace with our hologram that we create?
Yeah, are we at, yes, that's the best question to have. Are we at peace with with ourself? Yeah. The great wisdom in those. I mean,
Eternal.
they knew that stuff back then, they just didn't have the terminology. They really knew all that stuff back then, but they just didn't have the up-to-date modern terminology, but they described it the same ways. They described it the same exact ways. And I haven't read those books. I just know that a lot of the ancient text philosophies know that stuff that's been, if anything has power like those do, chances are they've been trying to be, they've been suppressed and hidden.
Well, I don't know how these made it out. Someone's looking out for us.
That's it. Someone was meant to that. Someone was
Well,
meant to
someone
that.
was looking out for me, that's for sure, because otherwise this would not be in my hand,
Yeah,
like because it really was life-saving. It really,
excellent.
yeah.
Good, good.
I mean, the classic Indian texts I would definitely recommend, but yeah. Oh my gosh, this has just been such a beautiful conversation. I appreciate you so much, Dr. Gabe.
Maureen, it's been absolutely wonderful. Um, how can people get a hold of you? How can people find out more of this? And I would love to have you on again and talk more about these Indian philosophies, that can be transformative. But how can people get a hold
Well,
of you?
yeah, so I'm at totalharmony.com. I'm based in the St. Louis, Missouri area. I'm at 314-325-9247. And my programs are segmented usually into about 10 hours. And my rates vary. Like I said, I have a open heart for healing and helping veterans. If they have the means, I ask them to pass along to people who cannot afford my work, right? But are really like mentally there and ready. And what else can I tell you? Oh yeah, my
And
book.
you,
The
oh
book's
yeah, and your book, yeah, tell me about that.
so it's called Flow, Know, and Grow, KNOW. And
Okay.
compilation of 27 different stories. It's an anthology and it runs the gamut. But I share some personal background information, and my chapter is called How I Changed My Mind for the Better.
Oh, fantastic. How beautiful.
Thank
And
you.
uh how can people have access to that book?
So it is on
What's the best way? Okay, on Amazon?
Amazon. Right now it's only on Kindle. I think it's still at $2.99. But
Okay.
international bestseller, I think in 20 different categories.
Right. Yeah, congratulations on that.
Thanks. I
That's
know. Like
awesome.
I was just like, I got the goosebumps when I got
Yeah,
through the
yeah.
book, and I was just like, okay, thank you for the signal. And the book is going to be on paperback soon enough, and then I'm going to have a book signing in person in the St. Louis area on June 16th, and I'm just so excited and elated. I was like, what a beautiful surprise.
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations. And I am looking forward to perhaps another meeting with you in the future, okay?
Absolutely. And I want to learn more about your school too, because like, uh, I don't know, we could take a whole other half an hour to talk about why, but we'll leave that.
Yeah, excellent.
Thank you. All
You are so welcome, Maureen. Excellent seeing you today, and I look forward to our next meeting, all right?
right.
All
Till then,
right.
bye for now.
Sounds good. Bye-bye.